America's realtor racket is alive and kicking.
Well, Gary, that's a really good example of the way the media has portrayed real estate professionals when reporting on the NAR settlement. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think they're doing us justice in the way that they've been reporting on us. And that's exactly what we're going to get into today for the Chris and Garry Show. Welcome to the Chris and Garry Show, where we talk about all things real estate. And today we're going to be talking about the way in which the media has featured and portrayed real estate agents when reporting on the NAR settlement, which has been big news. And so, Gary, let's dive right in. So this is a good example, Gary, of the way of one of many headlines that I came across when doing searches and reviewing like media headlines and reporting on the NAR settlement. In fact, get this, Gary, I took the liberty taking all of the recent headlines. Okay, like I just copy and pasted all the recent headlines.
There are a lot of them. There are a lot of them.
And I dropped them into a thing called a sentiment analysis tool. And a sentiment analysis tool is simply something that it uses AI, but basically what it does is it reads text and it'll tell you whether or not something is positive, negative, or neutral, right? And so I took.
It doesn't take AI or a genius to understand what's going to be coming out of these headlines about realtors these days.
So in my sentiment analysis, the tool that I was using, and I dropped all the language in there from probably the last few months, and 92.8 or something like that % negative was the way what it reported to me. So, and I think that's what we know. That's what we're seeing. And to be honest, Gary, let me ask you this question. You know, you've seen headlines like this and you've interacted with prospective customers. First, when you're reading mainstream media, when you're reading media about the NAR settlement, how does it make you feel typically when you see something like, hey, you're part of a racket, right? You're part of a mob, a conspiracy.
You know, I think this is one of the rare times when I wish I still got the paper newspaper, because I wouldn't feel bad about crumpling it up and throwing it at the wall, you know? But I can't take my iPad and throw it up against the wall every single time I read a negative article about realtors these days. But the way it makes me feel is my initial guttural reaction is, I'm like, how dare you say that about it? You don't know anything about us. And in fact, you're not even reporting on the news, because let's be honest, these days, these news companies are not reporting on news. All they're doing is they're opining in order to get clickbait. They are doing a great job at what they are paid to do, and that is to get us to click and see what is exactly that they're talking about. So that's the first reaction.
And get us worked up in the process too, by the way.
It gets us worked up, absolutely. And I mean, if you're watching this and you're a realtor, it's hard not to get worked up when you see that said about us, about you, and about our industry. Mm-hmm. And then what I do is I step back for a second, and after my initial reaction, I take a step back and I think, okay, replace the word realtor with a different industry. It could be anything, and say the legal racket. It could be the used car racket, the insurance racket, the mortgage racket. It could be the IRS racket. It could be the government racket. I mean, you replace that with anything. And then what I do is I sit with that for a moment to understand, if I'm a consumer and I'm reading that about a different industry, then how does it make me feel? So I'm trying to get both sides of the story of how does it make me feel as a realtor? It makes me feel dirty. It makes me feel gross. And then how does it make me feel as a consumer if I were put to maybe substitute that term with some other, and how does that make me feel? So, I'm looking at both sides of the coin here, and I'll got to tell you, Chris, both sides of the coin, they don't look good.
So that's a good question. That's actually a really good process to ask yourself. You know how it affects you, but like, how's that affecting consumers? How's that going to affect my next prospective client? Because I got to imagine if you're, one of the new practice changes that we have that will go into effect in August is that we have to have a signed written buyer's representation agreement with our buyers before we start touring and showing them homes. Now, That means we have to have a conversation about, our compensation and the services, and have that and sign in a contract with us that we are going to do these things for them, and they're going to compensate us for that. And I got to imagine having headlines like that, we're a part of a racket, part of a conspiracy, part of some sort of extortionary process. I got to imagine that's going to make things harder.
It is. I think what this does, Chris, is yes, I think we have all come to grips with the changes that are coming down, right? We have all come to grips. We understand, okay, these are the different fundamental things, different practices that I'm going to have legally when I'm working with buyers. So that, for a lot of us, that's going to be a big hurdle. That's going to be a big shift, a big change. We've got to start practicing now for that. But then what these the media companies do, I'm not even going to call them news anymore, because I don't think that exists anymore. These media marketing companies, I'll call them the media rackets. What they're doing is they're adding fuel to the fire. They're just making it even more challenging and difficult for us as realtors to adjust to this, because it's like, now they're just like, it's like we have a wound and they're like just digging it in. Yeah. And so, but at the same time, I also look at this, Chris, as you know, I always look at challenges like these as enormous opportunities, which we can talk about in a minute. But I think that first we have to get over the rage. I mean, that's an emotion that we all have about this, is we got to get over the rage and then settle down and say, okay, what now?
I think we can absolutely take control of that narrative. But I have a question for you. As you've talked to recent customers and recent prospective customers, what has been their impression about how the media has reported on it, or even how they've interacted with you? Has it had a negative effect, or has it been more of a confusing effect for them?
No, it's absolute confusion. And in fact, here's what's fascinating. One of my clients is a news anchor at a national news television station. Okay. So he's in the thick of it. Right. We were having coffee. Recently, and we sat down, and he looks at me and goes, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Great. Why? Do I not look good? Like, I slept great. What are you talking about?" And he goes, "No, how are you doing about these news releases about your industry?" And I said, "Well, how are you doing with it?" And he goes, "To be honest, we don't even know what it means. We're just reporting on it, but we have no idea what this stuff means." And so if somebody who is so close to reporting this has no concept as to what it actually means, then that would say to me, our general consumer, the buyers and sellers and prospective buyers and sellers that we are working with now or in the future, in the near future, they're completely ignorant, which, by the way, ignorance is not a bad thing. All ignorance means is that they lack the knowledge of what something is. They are completely ignorant as to what this is and what this means to them. They don't care what it means to me.
Right.
Let's be very clear about this. The buyers and sellers care about, what does this mean to me? But they're so confused about it that I think a lot of them, they see the media, they see the hype, and then they completely forget about it until it comes up. And so I think part of, as you said, taking control of that narrative is also going to be educating our clients as to what it actually means.
Now, you mentioned that something like a challenge like this can be an opportunity, and that's something that I've seen. As I have interacted with people who are not in real estate necessarily, but prospective consumers of real estate, is it seems like people are mostly curious, like, what's that settlement all about? What does it mean? What is and they don't necessarily remember the negative. I think it's the negative sort of headline or the way it's reported maybe got their attention, but all it did was sort of partially expose, part of a process and part of the players in the process for them to say, "Oh gosh, I don't even really know how this works." You know what I mean? Like and I think to your point, having and not being afraid to educate people and not being afraid to have those conversations, I think that's really important.
So Chris, I think you just nailed something, is that I think in our culture, we have become so accustomed to ignoring controversy or ignoring adversity and just sweeping it under the rug. It's like, if I put it here, nobody will see it. But I think what that does is a major disservice to our consumers, because if we hit this head on, then our customers have no choice but to be educated by us, see us as the voice of reason in this confusing time. And then, as we become that voice of reason and we're educating them about what's happening in our industry and what this means to them, like, they don't really care about what's happening. It's, how does that affect me? What's in it for me? And so if we can educate them about that, it is just generally going to build trust. It's going to elevate that trust level that they have with us. And then ultimately, then they're going to listen to our advice. They're going to listen as we consult them. They're going to trust what we have to say. So then it doesn't become, okay, I'm going to sweep this under the rug. And then what's going to happen for a few of those customers, they're going to lift up the corner of the rug and they're going to say, what is this? And then all of a sudden it becomes an objection to working with you, instead of saying, hey, I'm not going to sweep this under the rug. In fact, here, I'm going to show it to you.
Well, if you try to hide it, it's kind of like one of those things where they're wondering, what do you got to hide, right? Like, if you try to deflect or defer the conversation or sweep it under the carpet, as you say, it actually piques their interest more. Like, hey, why don't you want to talk about this? Is there something wrong? Are you doing something wrong, right? As opposed to just, it's interesting how the media is reported on this whole NAR settlement. Let me ask you, what's your assessment? What's your opinion? What have you read? What's your understanding about what's been reported in this settlement? Listen for where their gaps in understanding are. Listen for the opportunities to educate, because then, right, you just hit it head on, and then you can talk about it, not defensively, but sort of in an educational way and in a way of curiosity and understanding. Well, now they're not wondering, what have you got to hide? They're like, wow, Gary explained that pretty well. I trust this guy even more now that he's been able to take what might be a difficult conversation and then turn that into something where there's meaning, and I understand the impact on me. And, that's what this means. Okay, let's move on, right? Like, at that point, it's, well, let's move on, because it's not as big of a, when you look at the impact on the consumer directly, the impact on the consumer that we know, there's a lot of speculation in the media about how home values might be affected or home prices might be affected. I read some headlines that talked about, slashing real estate commissions, as if there will be no more real estate commissions, as if there's going to be no more real estate people. And I think, once you get rid of those inflammatory sort of statements that have been made, and you look at, well, these are the real changes, right? These are the real changes that go into effect. Things like buyer broker compensation not being listed in the MLS. That's a real change, right? That's a real change that could potentially affect the consumer in terms of how they're going to navigate the real estate buying process.
Sure.
And selling process. So you educate them on that stuff, and now they're informed, and now you are the one who enlightened them, and so therefore they trust you more. And I think, that's a great way to interact with it. I do think, though, Gary, to your point, you mentioned earlier about sort of like taking control of this or facing this, is we can go on the offensive here. We don't have to just sit back and continue to turn the other cheek, so to speak, as the media starts taking punches at us.
I don't play defense. I never have. I grew up playing soccer, never played defense. Couldn't stand it. I was always on the front line. I was always a striker. I'm always on the offense. I grew up playing tennis. I never sat back at the baseline and just lobbed back and forth playing defense. That's not in my nature. And I don't think that's in the nature of most realtors that I know, because we are solopreneurs. We're entrepreneurs. We own our own businesses. And it takes a lot of guts to do this, which means that we're not afraid of this controversy. We're not afraid of hitting things like straight on. And so, we're not afraid of going on the offensive. We're not passive, that is for sure. And so we're not going to we're not going to take this lying down.
So I think that there are some specific, I'm going to put my marketing hat on specifically.
Yeah. So by the way, I wanted to let everybody know in our partnership between myself and Chris, I'm the realtor, I'm the salesperson. Chris does all of the marketing for all of our companies. And so when he and I were discussing this, And he said, okay, well, what does this mean to you? How do you want to do this? How do you want to educate? And then I explained it to him. And then I turned to him and I said, well, Chris, how do we get our message out? How do we market this to people so that they are educated? How do we stand out from the crowd and say, hey, everybody, this is what's going on. I'm here to educate and talk to you. Chris, what are some different tactics and ways that we can take control of this narrative?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to be that we have to focus on is the message itself, or the messages that we want to use. And real estate is like any professional services. You can't market professional services the same way you would market toothpaste, or the same way you might market, a luxury car, or the same way.
Those are products.
Right.
We're something completely different.
Heck, I mean, we can't market ourselves the same way we might market a listing, right? Because the listing, it's a product. I mean, it's a tangible thing. It represents what it is, as well as an implied lifestyle associated with it. So you can market that in a different way. But when it comes to any form of professional services, which real estate is, it's different. And one of the biggest reasons why it's different is that as the typical consumer of real estate services, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the knowledge to know if you're doing a good job or not. Now, they might have a level of customer satisfaction because they enjoy their interactions with you, right? But at the same time, they may not know if you're actually doing a good job. Why is that? Because they're not experts in real estate. If you were to ask them, would you know what I do? I guess you put as a listing agent, they might say, why don't you put a sign in the yard, and maybe you put it in the MLS, and well, then what? I don't know what you do, right? Maybe you run an open house. People just don't know. Here's another thing. A lot of times consumers, they don't know whether we've done a good job until after the result has taken place. And even then, there are certain things that are outside of our control where the result doesn't necessarily dictate whether we did a great job professionally speaking. Okay? Yeah, this could be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer. A lawyer might lose a case even though they did everything right because their client was flat out guilty and made too many mistakes, right? And left too much evidence that no matter how great they did their job, they were still going to get a negative result. And that happens in real estate too. So because of that, there's a really good article in the Harvard Business Review from the 1980s. This is an old article, and it talks about, the need for marketing ourselves and the message in which we market ourselves being a little bit different because consumers don't have that expertise. But at the same time, that's part of what they're hiring for is, do I trust your competence? Do I trust your knowledge? Do I trust your understanding of how this works? So all of a sudden that opens up a new opportunity though, because you can do personal branding, right? I'm not saying you can't do personal branding and putting your face and likeness on your marketing. I think that's actually a good thing. That's part of branding. But that alone doesn't tell somebody whether or not you're competent at selling real estate. And so all of a sudden we have to start answering a different set of questions or start incorporating a different set of messages within our marketing. And particularly if we're going to market for, going on the offense here for the NAR settlement, is to start using education as the core of your message. Because when you educate, that is a form of marketing if you're educating on topics that people are curious about. So, in fact, you might educate people. So here's an example of some marketing that you could do. You might choose to educate people that, the recent settlement requires that all home buyers have a written agreement with their real estate professional. And here's the four things that need to be in there.
Here's what they're thinking, right? They're thinking, all I need to do is pick up my phone, call Gary, and he'll show me houses. Mm-hmm. That's because that is traditionally what has probably happened in your business in the past. That's probably what happened the last time they bought a house, if they bought a house before.
So what you can do is explain to people, hey, new rules going into effect where all buyers, before you start looking at homes, you're going to need to have an agreement with your real estate professional. Now enter in the education opportunity. The news itself, or the fact that it's needed, is kind of education, but where it becomes of great interest to that home buyer is, well, what should be included in it? How do I protect myself? How do I get out of that agreement? Right? What are the terms that should be in that agreement? Now, I can use that as an opportunity to explain to them, whether you sign an agreement with me or with anybody, here's the things that should be in there, right? You might want to look for an easy exit clause. I always include that in all of my buyer agreements, buyer representation agreements, so that, if we don't have a meeting of the minds, that you're not committed to just stuck with me, right? And vice versa. And so you could educate people, and there's so many topics. So once you start exploring the range of topics that even the media and the settlement itself creates, is you can start educating people on that. Now, once you have those set of messages picked, for example, what should go into that that agreement with your real estate agent, once you have some of those topics picked, now all of a sudden you can start using the things that you're already doing or you should already be doing as part of your normal marketing processes, right? So most of you hopefully are doing some form of sphere of influence marketing, right? Whether you're sending emails out or posting on social media, like you have marketing that's going out to all your contacts and connections, your sphere of influence, your
shooting video.
Yeah, everybody, you can take those mechanisms that you should have or do have and just start incorporating those now messages into it. Hey, what should go into that agreement when you're working with a real estate professional? By the way, it's going to be required come August. So if they don't ask you to sign something come August 17th, by the way, you should be aware that they are required to have that. Again, you're doing a service for your sphere of influence by letting them know, because maybe they're working with somebody who's not quite sure that the practice changes go into effect on August 17th and they're thinking it's September 17th for whatever reason, and they're not asking for that. Well, you can help your customers comply and work within the new regulations that we have. So, another example would be is how could you use some of the higher traffic sources, like let's say marketing of a listing, right? Or really, you mentioned video, but I think of like listing and marketing our listings is probably one of the single largest traffic sources that we have to our real estate website. And whenever I can bring people to our website and I can get their attention for a little bit, maybe it's about marketing a listing, what can I do to sort of intersect with that client experience to produce this educational opportunity? I will say this. Really what we're talking about here is having a framework or having a strong foundation for your reputation. Because ultimately, all these negative headlines, all they're doing is, it's not necessarily a direct attack on our reputations, but that is the outcome.
Well, that's the way it feels. That's right, the way it feels.
They're trying to get clicks, but the downstream consequences, your reputation is attacked, right? Like they may not have had that intent, but that's the result. And if your reputation is attacked, that's what we need to go to work on, is creating a really strong foundation for your reputation. In fact, some of you have great reputations in the marketplace already, where someone who may read the headline will say, Gary would never do that. I know Gary. I trust Gary. I know Gary's not part of a racket, right? Gary actually helped me out in a really big way. He provided great service. He helped us out. I saw him definitely place our needs above his own multiple times in that transaction or in the transactions that we work. So you're going to have people who are able to testify to your reputation. But remember that our reputations now these days are not just word of mouth. They're word of click. It's on social media. It's on our website. It's on all the ratings and review sites that are out there that we happen to might be referenced on, right? It's our Google profile, right? When people run a search. In fact, if you were to take this little activity of go to, you're watching this video, open up a different internet browser window and just Google yourself, right? Google yourself and see what happens. And whatever comes back, that is the portal, that is the entryway for you to see your reputation, because your reputation starts online these days. And that is where we have to intersect. Our online reputation has to be solid. By the way, if they can't find you online, that's a mistake, right? If what they do come across doesn't convince them that you are competent, that's a really big mistake. A good example is, many of us use social media. I would say probably the majority of us use social media. And we might from time to time like to post stuff on social media. And, I like to joke around. My daughters like to send me cat videos. And I got nothing wrong with cat videos. They're cute, they're funny, they fall over, they have a good time. And it's a good 20-second video to watch a cat video. But if all I did was go to Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn perhaps and post videos of cats doing funny, cute things, you would think of me as Chris the cat video guy. You wouldn't think of me as somebody competent in the realm of real estate. You would think of me as the guy who shares cat videos, which is nothing wrong with that, but it's not going to help a buyer or a seller say, hey, I got to hire you, Gary, based on what I have come across online. Maybe even it was a traditional word of mouth referral. What's that person going to do who got referred to you?
They're going to Google you.
They're going to go online. They got to look up your contact information online. It's not like people don't walk around with your business card these days, Like, it's just not, I have Gary's card right here. No, they're going to say, yeah, Gary Kraft. Yeah, he's in Austin. Google Gary Kraft Realtor and he'll come up, right? That's how you're going to likely get referred. And so that reputation has to be really strong there. So you can take those messages and go on the counteroffensive, just in the normal, regular marketing that you're doing, just start incorporating more effective messages that go out.
So what I'm hearing, Chris, is that we're of the same mind, is that I'm seeing this as an opportunity to stand out, and you're seeing it as an opportunity to continue to build the foundation and really explore our own identity and branding online with our consumers. We're just seeing opportunity all over here.
It is absolutely opportunity because, through the marketing that you're doing, you can facilitate, you can create conversations about real estate through your marketing. It creates the conversations. Isn't it great when you run into somebody and they ask you about real estate? Because they literally just open the door wide open for you to have a real estate conversation.
I can ask you questions about real estate all day long.
And that's really what we want to have, is more of those conversations, and our marketing can produce those types of conversations.
Yeah, and I think really using that marketing to be able to sprinkle in these opportunities to educate people as we are adding. I mean, Chris, ultimately what we're talking about is taking this, creating messages to go on the offensive and sprinkling it into our messaging that we're already sharing in the marketplace. So it's just additional marketing and branding that we can communicate in the market.
Yeah. And, if you've liked what you've heard here, or you want to even take next steps, the first step is to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you want to get more tips on marketing or how to have conversations with your real estate clients, go check us out at thepaperlessagent.com. We've got a blog with tons of great resources on there, lots of great tools, lots of great videos. And until then, we'll see you in the next episode. Take care.